Good morning. Gosh, I can hardly wait to hear myself speak. Here we are. Lovely to see so many familiar faces in the audience. Lots of familiar faces. So, there we are. For my children, I live. And I'll give you the next 20 minutes to convert that to, for your children, I work. Because that is, of course, what we do day in, day out. Welcome to our school. I visit a lot of schools. I'm fortunate to be able to do that. And recently, I was having a delightful tour of a school with the head. Two boys, around about age 12, 13-ish, were walking past, and the head stopped them, as one does. I've done it myself, and said, "Hello, boys, how are you? Are you having a good, interesting, productive day?" And they smiled and said, "Yes, thank you, super." "Good," he said, looked mightily pleased with both them and himself. And as we walked away, but actually just marginally out of earshot, one of the boys turned to the other and said, "Who was that chap?" And, note to self, get out of office more. So what's going on? A source from a National Heads Survey. Should we spend a lot of time feeling that we are constantly having to meet unreasonable demands from parents and brace ourselves constantly? And of course, ask this question, there he is, John Ray, for 16 years with great energy and success, headmaster of Westminster. Why doesn't the head do something about it? Was a familiar cry from parents. Bullying, racism, drugs, and much more. Everybody has a view, because just as parents, I think, feel insecure in their relations with the school, teachers actually also feel insecure because theirs is the one job in society that everyone feels qualified to criticise. Because we all went to school, we know how it's done. Which makes us, I think, a little bit guarded in our exchanges with parents sometimes. And which is a pity, a great pity, but understandable too. I think we have to be aware of the stereotypes. And in the pantheon of education stereotypes, the pushy parent is right up there with the tweed-clad, leather elbow patch geography teacher and the smokers behind the bike sheds. You know, we've heard them all, haven't we, all the cliches. But actually, are the cliches true? Are we right to vilify the concerned, ambitious parent as a tiger mother? Why is it always mothers, by the way? Or to inform our parent body with a wry smile that helicopter parents are not welcome here, unless it's Prince William, obviously. Be wary of the stereotypes, because actually that, if we even have that conversation, I think that gives us a slight problem. So last year, it was an interesting year, wasn't it? When even the pundits found themselves all at sea. All sorts of things going on, and who'd have thought that, you know, in April of 2017 we'd find ourselves at the mercy of a couple of chaps called Donald. So much going on. Parenting isn't what it was, is a familiar cry. Well, why would it be? The world isn't what it was. Why do we expect things to stay the same when actually change is a constant and it's all around us? Why would we think that old mindsets and techniques would remain when everything is changing? It's no one thing. It's an interplay of multiplicities that are going on in our society. So it's a strange one, it is a strange one, and 2017, of course, and it's all going so very well so far, isn't it? Rory Bremner made me smile. I don't know if you saw his programme last night, but he actually said we've got a Prime Minister called May, a Chancellor called Hammond. What could possibly go wrong? All we need is Jeremy Clarkson and we'll be fine. We've got the full team. But there's a lot going on. Food prices are up, we've all noticed. House values are down, apart from in Manchester, apparently. There are reportedly 1,000 schools near roads where thousands of children are exposed to illegal levels of toxins, and 761 of those schools are here in London. Lots to worry about, lots to think about. And meanwhile, the UK games industry, 30% of UK manufacturing firms and 40% of US firms with UK offices, numerous car companies and UK banks and investment services are all watching and waiting to see whether they're about to be transferred to the Frankfurt office. So, there's a lot going on in the world, and we shouldn't be surprised, actually, that this has an effect on our parents, and anything that has an effect on our parents also has an effect on our children. because our material wealth and feelings of personal safety has a profound effect on our thoughts and behaviour. And crucially, children download the template of how to manage their lives from their parents. So perhaps it's no coincidence that child and adolescent mental health is of increasing concern, and that numbers of children reporting feelings of loneliness and isolation are reaching record highs. Our reaction to uncertainty, driven by our evolutionary makeup, is to hold on even more tightly to the things that matter to us, to the things that we most value. Never forget, you are dealing with people's two most precious possessions, their children and their money, and not necessarily in that order. So our stress response is impulsive. We're constantly primed for action. This is what it does to us in a fast-moving, fast-paced, fast-changing, and slightly scary world. We're constantly primed for action, as you will have seen, no doubt, in your school car park, if you're lucky enough to have one, amongst the four-wheel drive urban attack vehicles circling, looking for a space. And we worry constantly about the harmful outcomes that might happen, or not, indeed. So, expect the unexpected. Excuse me. Robust findings in behavioural science. Excuse me, just come off a plane, this is the voice. Robust findings in behavioural science show that people under stress react, and react quickly. We therefore, I think, need to become much better at predicting likely responses. The commercial world is very good at this. They have a well-honed PR team keeping an eye on things, constantly on the lookout. And I do think that in schools, we often find ourselves on the back foot slightly. Something happens at another school, and we read about it and think, oh, well, thankfully it was there, not our school, and it couldn't happen here because we have a policy, don't we? And there's no further thought until it does. And invariably it does. And then we have a problem, because complacency and failure to listen are amongst the biggest criticism from our parents. So it's our survival instinct that's driving it. Thank you. Home sweet home. It's supposed to be a sanctuary, isn't it? A place of safety, and the realization that that's no longer the case has brought a tangible shift in the anxiety experienced by parents when trying to work out how best to support their child. Throw into that pot all the recent news stories about adolescent mental health issues, gender issues, internet safety, safeguarding, and the collapse of parental confidence in the university degree as being the answer to their child's future. And suddenly you have a very worrying package of concerns for an already anxious parent body. Parents are also aware of the pressures that the internet can create for their children, but are generally, by their own admission, not on top of it. So they expect and want school to control, to advise, to intervene. So what do they want from your website? Well, I've seen quite a few. I look at websites all the time, and many of them are excellent, but a lot of them could do with another look, I think. I think the needs are changing, because I think what parents want from your website when they're investigating your school for the first time is one thing. But I think once they are a member of your school body, perhaps they're looking for something else. Their needs change as they move through school. They need so much more than to read about the plans for this year's choir trip or last Saturday's first 15 results, because frankly, if their child is involved, they know. If their child's not involved, they don't care. That's the reality. However, what they do want from you is wider information and reassurance. For example, if there's an article in the press that says heading a ball can cause brain damage in later life, or possibly the onset of dementia, then actually, rather than Googling it, what they want to do is turn to your school website and understand that you have a view on this. They want that information at the click of a button. They want to know that, one, you're aware, and two, you have a plan. And what are you doing about it? They need that a click away. They want better advice directly from the school, rather than Googling it generally. They don't need the nitty-gritty of your syllabus. They don't need to know what every subject is teaching and who's teaching it, but actually they are hugely reassured, and I've seen some schools do this extremely well, by staff, individual staff members, feeding back their enthusiasm for their subject, or professional development perhaps, and saying, you know, I'm doing a personal study, I've been looking at the research, or I've been on a training course, and we are looking at a very interesting methodology, and we're now using it in our school to develop X, Y, Z. Great for parents to read and to understand, and very good, I think, professional practice for your staff too. No, there we are. So, just touching on the Good Schools Guide, excuse me, which some of you love and adore and others not, but there we are. But we do guide parents towards asking some of the questions that your prospectus don't answer, such as some of the ones that are on the slide. And since they're not in a position to give the head or staff the kind of thorough vetting you'd need for MI5, and they'd like to, believe me, it's a leap of faith, and often it's instinctive. And therefore, all the months of research and rational analysis can go right out of the window in the blink of an eye. And it happens. You know, I turn up at a school, and I turned up at a school last year, and most schools are very welcoming. I was at a very good school earlier this week. I was at Allain School, and the guy on the gate lodge actually said, oh, we're expecting you, lovely to see you, have you had a good journey? You know, all of the chat, all lovely, lovely. Turned up at school last year where they said, well, I don't know who you are, we're not expecting you, but then nobody around here tells me anything. Had I been a prospective parent, that would have told me a great deal about that school. I visited the school again last term, actually accompanying some parents because their son is on the autistic spectrum. And so the head, understandably and probably wisely, actually chose a guide, another boy who was also on the autistic spectrum, to show us around. And of course, with an autistic child, you have the advantage of the child who tells you the way it really is. And of course, the head turned to the boy and said, so what would you tell our visitor about this school? And the boy said, well, he said, I'd say they do a reasonably good job, but there's a few members of staff they should get rid of. And he was right, actually. He was right. You know, an autistic boy and a Yorkshire autistic boy, you tells it like it is. One of my school visits, a couple of sixth formers was showing me around and explaining to me that as sixth formers, they had a new ruling at the school that meant actually they now had to clock in and clock out, factory style at the school. Tongue firmly in cheek, I asked them if they ever actually clocked their friends in and out, just as a favour. And they were genuinely horrified by my question. You know, clearly the youth of today are lacking in entrepreneurial spirit, I feel. You know, it would have been a given in my day. I'm going to charge them. But perhaps, of course, we were ahead of our time in terms of the Northern Powerhouse. Which brings me to this important question. Well, does it exist, the North-South divide? Does it still exist? Well, sort of, except that now it's much more a case of London and the rest of the country. I think that's the fact, that's the reality. Whilst your London parents may well have had their child's name registered before conception and then spent the preschool years gearing them up with preschool mandarin and kale smoothies, you know, it is different elsewhere. I like this map because it's not schools, it's actually branches of Waitrose. But hey, you know, it's quite, you know, we could sit here and spot the difference. But actually, all the research does actually show that if you've got a branch of Waitrose nearby, you'll have quite a few fee-paying parents in the area. It's a fallacy to think that North-South parents want different things. They don't, actually. They really don't. Though the sheer availability of places in some areas of the country undoubtedly means that parents are aware of and will sometimes use their sway to seek greater influence and authority over decision-making in school, which can, of course, bring additional pressures. But if you're sitting comfortably in a large, oversubscribed school, perhaps the power could be shifting. Be aware Are you aware, for example, that the more powerful you think you are, the longer you take to answer your emails? It's a fact from our research. People notice close parental involvement is a net positive. For the vast majority of parents, going private reflects the importance they place on their education. So, 800 free schools now open or about to open, and more grammar schools on the horizon. We cannot be complacent, nor should we be. What about good enough parenting? A lot of parents ask me, tell me how to be a good parent. Please tell me how to be a good parent. It's an interesting one, because I don't think my parents' generation would have ever have asked anybody that question. Not because they thought they were a great parent, but they certainly didn't think they were perfect, but they thought they were good enough. And they were doing the best that they could possibly do. And that actually was enough. Somehow, that's no longer enough for many of our parents. Being good enough isn't apparently deemed good enough, which is a shame, because it puts undoubtedly a huge amount of pressure on our children. Ambitious, highly successful adults who fail to share their challenges, their battles, their fears, their failures with their children are actually setting those children up for all kinds of levels of anxiety. Life is hard enough. We don't need our children to think there's something wrong with them if they fail at something. So, how to be a good parent? Well, I always say to parents, it's always the same answer. Just be the adult that you would one day like your child to become. If you smoke and drink, they smoke and drink. If you read books, they read books. It is as simple as that. So, most schools are doing a great job. And perhaps, though, if we just explored ways of helping parents to feel good enough, they would be more confident in taking back control, rather than passing so much of the child rearing to schools. Surely, that's a win-win for all concerned. Your parents are entrusting you with the academic, physical, moral, and spiritual welfare of their offspring at a time when everything else around them feels a little uncertain, because they have a deep and highly evolutionary need to know that their children really are in safe hands. My thanks to the chairman for inviting me today, and thank you for being the audience that your parents and pupils would have expected you to be. Thank you so much. Thank you.